Hi, welcome to this Business Leader Breakthroughs Minisode, where we highlight the best bits of a previous show episode. If you enjoy these quick insights and want to check out the full episode, you'll find the link in the show notes.
Or go to thebreakthrough.co. Now let the breakthroughs begin. Hey, look, we've got something a little bit controversial to discuss in the podcast this week, and that is that the vast majority of money spent on training is an absolute waste.
That's the message that comes out of a study that I looked at, and it says that about 200 billion US is spent on training in total, a year, 200 billion. And executives that they've surveyed reckon that they get a return on about 10% of that.
Right.
So that means that 180 billion is basically wasted. Most training is a waste of money. Yeah, that's
and I think we've all experienced some version of this personally.
Yeah. Talking to a guy yesterday, and he was talking about his team of team leaders and supervisors, and he's given them technical training, given them training, and they've gone off on courses. And he said, but you know the problem, they apply maybe 10% of that for about 10% of the time. So things don't stick. The fundamental problem is that the gap between learning and application is about as wide as the place where you do the learning from the place where you do the doing. So this gap between learning and doing is the fundamental source of all that wasted money.
So in terms of a model, is when people are looking at training, should they be considering a way a certain learning model works?
We kind of uncovered this. It's been around for a while, and it really kind of accelerated our understanding of how to design our programs. And it was kind of transformed when we saw this piece, which was 10% of learning effectiveness comes from content. So that's the classroom. 20% comes from experiencing it, exposing it, socializing it. And then 70% is on the job. And that's the practice. And it kind of stands to reason. Whereas the classroom stuff tends to be the other way around. The assumption is that 90% of the learning effectiveness actually happens in the classroom. Just doesn't. When you're thinking about training, you should look at that balance between, well, how much is content, how much is kind of exposed to groups. One of the other interesting things they found is that actually most learning, even at university, is not classroom-based. It is, in fact, like at Harvard, 60% of the learning actually comes from hanging out with other smart students.
Absolutely.
Not from the books and not from the classroom.
And the important bit is not how smart the other people are in the group.
No.
I mean, obviously it adds value, but the important bit is the discussion and the socialization of those ideas. What did you think about that? What did you take out of it? What are you going to do differently? What are you going to practice going forward based on these things?
And we know that for people to learn, they actually have to struggle with the application of it. It has to be a struggle, and they have to undertake that struggle in applying the theory, the concept, to their reality. And that's how our brains absorb and learn. There's been a huge push, of course, in recent years for online learning, but actually what the study found is that online learning doesn't work that well either. And the reason for that, and we've seen this as well, is because there's no, if you're learning on your own, there's no kind of collaboration or exposure going on. Those online programs tend to be better for what's called technical skills, process skills, not for those soft skills around relationships, around communication, around managing others. They don't go well online. So what does that tell us about thinking about training of any kind, but in particular leadership development or management development? That it needs to be that the traditional classroom model it tends to be too generic, it doesn't cater for those soft skills, and it's certainly too far away from the workplace. But again, the problem with the traditional classroom base, is that it's not accessible. And today people are expecting to be able to personalise their content, so they need to be able to see it on their devices in their time. And it needs to be intensely practical, that you can go away from here and immediately start practicing those skills. And there's a whole lot of pieces, I think online is very good around chunked content.
Yes.
Because we learn in small wadges.
So we hear the term blended learning bandied around a lot.
Yep.
What does it mean?
Well, for us, blended learning is about that kind of 10-20-70 model, and having content which is delivered in chunk-sized pieces that people can absorb in their own space, in their own place. It is blended in the sense of they work in a collab group for an hour a month, And there they talk about the issues. It's facilitated by somebody outside. So they've got that accountability. There's a meeting scheduled. They have to turn up and they have to talk about what they've learned, the exercises in there. So we're getting that kind of physical, online and personal. And then they have to go and practice it. So the final bit about the blended is that they practice their skills in their workplace. The other piece that that kind of caught us by surprise was the amount of blended learning or learning that goes on in the workplace itself, outside our structures. Managers are having conversations with each other just as they see each other in the corridor or on the work floor, and they're having conversations about what they've learned and how they're applying it. So when we talk about the gap between where we're learning and where we're doing is nothing. It's immediate.
The other thing we've seen is you've got to have leaders involved.
Totally.
So if, in our example, if we're training a management team, the leader has got to participate in that learning experience as well. Because we know what happens if you just send your team out to a training, to a workshop, they go out, they kind of do it, it's very disconnected to the organisation.
Correct.
The leader's not involved, the leader can't reinforce the learning, they can't help with that skill development once they come back in.
Yeah, it's a big downside with both classroom and online, all other forms of learning that are not blended. Is that leader involvement. And we know that's probably, it's one of the most powerful aspects is a structured coaching session. Because when we say to leaders, are you happy with how much time you're spending coaching your people? It's never enough. It's never enough.
Yeah. And one of the big challenges around the coaching piece is often leaders don't know how they should be coaching. So again, giving them a structure around, hey, this is the skill we focused on this month.
Yep.
This is the template. Here are the core notes for you to go through. Let's now reflect on that and use that as our coaching framework.
And again, a marvelous example of blended learning, because there's some content that they're having a conversation about. There's the application in the workplace right there. Again, gap between learning and doing, zero.
Yep. Superb.